I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who notices something as subtle as the scent of cologne on a scarf, but that night I couldn't ignore it. Haley had just come back from a business trip to Seattle. Her flight landed late, around 11:15 p.m., and I had offered to pick her up, but she insisted on calling a rideshare. "No point in both of us losing sleep," she texted. At the time, it didn't strike me as odd. I even appreciated the gesture. But now, I wonder if that was just her way of controlling the moment she walked back into our lives. I was in the kitchen rinsing out a mug when I heard the front door open. Her heels tapped against the floor like nothing was wrong, that casual rhythm I had grown so used to. She was dressed just a bit too well for a flight, black slacks, a tailored coat, and that green scarf I hadn't seen before. She looked polished, fresh, not like someone who'd been in airports for hours. There was a lightness to her, too much maybe. She was glowing in a way that didn't make sense to me at the time. "Hey, babe," she said, dropping her bag by the stairs. "Sorry I'm late. Flight was delayed a bit." I set the mug down, walked over, and gave her a hug. It was then that I smelled it, something strong and unmistakably male. Not my cologne, not her body spray. It was richer, darker. Leather and musk, maybe. I pulled back slightly, puzzled. "New perfume?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She glanced down at herself, then back up, flashing a quick smile. "Oh, probably from the hotel. The elevator was packed with people at checkout. You know how that goes." "Yeah," I said, nodding. But I didn't know. Not really. As she headed upstairs to change, I stood there in the living room, unmoving. My mind already gnawed at the edges of something I couldn't quite put into words. I told myself I was overthinking it. People pick up scents. Hotels are full of strangers. She didn't act guilty. And yet, something didn't sit right. She came back down a few minutes later in sweatpants and one of my old t-shirts, like nothing happened. I offered to make tea. She accepted. While I was grabbing mugs, her phone buzzed twice on the counter. Normally, she kept it face down. That night, for some reason, she left it up. Maybe it was a slip. Maybe it was a test. A message popped up on the screen. I saw the contact name, just an initial. T, that was already strange. Then I saw the photo. It was grainy, probably taken in a dimly lit room, but clear enough. Haley was in it unmistakably. She was seated in what looked like a lounge or hotel bar. Her hair was down, her makeup done in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. Her arms were wrapped around a man whose face wasn't fully visible. He wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, hand resting on her hip. She was laughing, head tilted back, eyes closed in a way that said, "I feel safe here." I didn't say anything. I just looked away and handed her the tea. When she took it, her eyes flicked to her phone, then quickly back to me. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." She studied me for a moment too long. Then she smiled, that practiced smile she used in interviews or when she was smoothing things over with a friend. "You've been tense lately. Work stress." Something like that. She came over, set her tea down, and placed both hands on my shoulders. "I missed you," she said. "Yeah?" She kissed my cheek. "You worry too much, Nicholas. I told you this trip was going to be routine. You're always in your head." I forced a laugh. "That's probably true." Then she tilted her head, narrowing her eyes. "Are we okay?" The question caught me off guard. It was delivered with the kind of softness that makes you second-guess yourself. Like maybe she really did believe everything was fine. Or maybe she wanted me to believe it. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded slowly. "We're okay." And that was it. She didn't press. She didn't ask if anything was wrong. She sat back down, picked up her tea, and changed the subject to something trivial: an annoying flight attendant, how overpriced airport sandwiches were, whether our son had asked about her. But I wasn't in that moment anymore. My mind kept circling back to that image on her phone. The photo. The body language. The lie. I didn't sleep much that night. She was out like a light, curled up beside me as if everything in the world was right. I stared at the ceiling, the sound of the heater clicking on and off like a clock counting down to something I couldn't name. It's strange how a single moment, an overlooked detail, a flash of something not meant to be seen, can crack the foundation of everything you thought you knew. It wasn't the cologne. It wasn't even the photo, not really. It was how quickly she deflected, how effortlessly she rewrote the script. That was the real clue. She didn't act surprised. She didn't fumble. She was calm, practiced, like someone who had done this before. By morning, the doubt had spread like a stain. And once it starts, it doesn't stop. You start asking questions in your own head. When did she stop telling me the truth? How long has she been this good at lying? What else don't I know? And the worst one, what if I never really knew her at all? The next morning, the house felt unusually quiet. Haley had already left for work by the time I came downstairs. There was a note on the counter. Coffee's on. I'll be home late. Don't wait up. Nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious on the surface. But when I picked up the mug she used, the lipstick on the rim wasn't her usual color. She always wore nude tones. This one was darker. Red, almost Berg *NDY. It wasn't proof of anything. But that's how doubt works. Once it takes root, even the smallest things start to feel like signs. And the signs were everywhere. I just hadn't been looking until now. I sat at the kitchen table for a while, the steam from my coffee rising and fading in front of me. My phone buzzed with emails and calendar notifications, but I ignored them. Instead, I just sat there, replaying everything in painful, scattered fragments. When had it started? I couldn't pinpoint an exact moment, but there had been shifts, small, steady, and easy to excuse at the time. The first major change was the passwords. A few months ago, she suddenly updated all of them. Her phone, her laptop, even the streaming services we used to share. She said it was because of some online privacy scare at her office. I believed her. Who wouldn't? But she didn't offer me the new ones, and I didn't ask. Then there were the nights she worked late. At first, it was just once or twice a week. She'd come home with takeout and stories about aggressive clients or a sudden pitch deadline. But the details were always vague. Sometimes she'd come in humming, too happy for someone who just spent 12 hours buried in spreadsheets. I remember one particular night, mid-March, I think. She came in glowing, hair slightly tousled, cheeks flushed like she'd just run through the cold. But it wasn't cold that night. In fact, it had been unseasonably warm. I asked how the meeting went, and she said, "Which one?" I paused, confused, because she had only mentioned one. The smile she gave me then was polite, detached. "Oh, right, that meeting. It was fine. Exhausting. And that was it. End of story." She used to tell me everything. Now I was lucky to get 3-word summaries. Even when she was home, she wasn't really present. She'd retreat to the bedroom with her laptop, say she needed to focus, then emerge hours later scrolling through her phone, smiling at messages I never saw. I used to ask who she was texting. She'd always say it was someone from work, Lisa, Sean, Nate from accounting, people I'd never met, conveniently generic. The int asterisk Macy between us, once easy and warm, had become almost transactional. Her kisses were quick, routine. Her touch, when it came, felt forced, like she was checking a box rather than reaching for me. I'd wake up some nights and realize she wasn't in bed. I'd find her on the couch, claiming insomnia, but she never looked tired, just distant. And then there was the ring. 2 weeks before Seattle, I found her wedding ring in her tote bag. I was reaching in to grab her keys, we were late for a dinner reservation, and there it was, sitting in the side pocket next to her lipstick and gum. I held it up, confused. "Forget something?" She barely flinched. "Oh, I take it off when I type sometimes." It scratches the laptop. Then she slipped it back on without missing a beat. It made sense, sort of, but it didn't sit right. Why keep it in her bag instead of leaving it in a drawer at home? Why was it off during a business trip? The more I thought about it, the more patterns emerged. She started traveling more for conferences and client visits, always with short notice. She no longer asked if I wanted to come with her on weekend getaways. She said she needed time alone, space to recharge. When I offered to plan a trip just the two of us, she said, "That's sweet, but I really need solo time right now." She once told me that routine life was suffocating. I thought she meant work. Now I wondered if she meant me. Her social media shifted too. Subtle but noticeable. She stopped posting photos of us. Birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, she'd snap pictures of the food or the view, but I was no longer in the frame. I asked once, jokingly, "Hey, am I bad for your brand?" She laughed. "You're too cute to share. I want to keep you all to myself." At the time, I thought it was charming. Now I wasn't so sure. What gnawed at me wasn't just the possibility that she had someone else. It was the realization that I might have been the only one still trying. I used to believe we were just in a rough patch. Everyone hits them, right? Life gets busy. People drift a little, then find their way back. But what I was looking at now didn't feel like a drift. It felt like an exit strategy. She had been untangling herself slowly, deliberately, and I had let her. In the weeks leading up to Seattle, she started suggesting we spend more time apart. It's healthy, she said. We don't need to be in each other's pockets all the time. She framed it like self-care, like something mature couples did. And maybe it was. But only one of us was pulling away. And every time I tried to close the distance, she'd create more. I once planned a surprise dinner, her favorite Thai place, candles, the whole thing. She came home, saw the table set, and froze. Oh, I didn't realize we were doing anything tonight. Her tone wasn't annoyed. It was worse than that. It was empty. She sat through the meal, barely touching her food, checking her phone every few minutes. I asked if something was wrong. She said she was just tired. She always said she was tired. Eventually, I stopped asking. But now, with the scent of someone else on her scarf, the photo from the bar still burned into my memory, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Everything I had overlooked or rationalized came rushing back like a flood. It wasn't just that something was wrong. It was that something had been going wrong for a long time, and she had been making sure I wouldn't notice until it was too late. And maybe it already was. There's a moment, I think, when suspicion crosses a line, when it stops being a quiet, gnawing doubt and becomes a mission. That moment came for me at 2:43 a.m., 3 days after Haley came home from Seattle. I hadn't been sleeping much. I'd lie next to her in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the silence between us was louder than I realized. That night, after she fell asleep peacefully, as always, I got up and sat in the hallway for almost an hour, just listening to the tick of the thermostat and the occasional hum of traffic outside. My mind was on fire. Every memory, every red flag, felt like a breadcrumb leading somewhere I hadn't dared to go yet. That's when I remembered her old laptop. It was tucked away in the guest room closet, buried under some of her college notebooks and a half-deflated yoga ball. She hadn't used it in over a year, not since she upgraded to the newer model. But Haley was a creature of habit. She liked her devices synced. Cloud backups. Familiar logins. She always said it made her feel organized. I plugged it in and powered it on. The battery was almost dead and the startup took forever, but when the screen finally flickered to life, I held my breath. To my surprise, she hadn't wiped it. Everything was still there, documents, bookmarks, old emails, and yes, her iCloud still logged in. I didn't want to do this. I told myself that a dozen times. But I also knew I'd never sleep again if I didn't. I needed to know. No more guessing. At first, it was uneventful. Work spreadsheets. Drafts of client presentations. Photos of our dog, blurry selfies, notes from webinars. I almost convinced myself I was wrong, that I'd built this entire case in my head out of paranoia and neglect. Then I found the folder. It was buried inside another folder labeled Budget Ideas 2021, which in itself was odd. Haley was a neat freak when it came to digital organization. She wouldn't have nested a personal photo folder under a work document unless she didn't want it to be found. My fingers hesitated over the trackpad. I clicked. Inside were several subfolders, each named with a date. They weren't evenly spaced. Some months had none. Others had multiple entries. I opened one from late February. Photos. Mostly candid. Haley in what looked like a hotel room mirror wearing a silk robe I didn't recognize. A few selfies, some with wine glasses in hand. In some, she was laughing. Alone. At least that's how it started. Then came the video. It didn't autoplay. The thumbnail was a still image, Haley standing in front of a full-length mirror, holding her phone. She was smiling, fixing her hair. Her lips moved, maybe talking to herself or recording a voiceover. I clicked play. At first, it felt harmless. Just her, in a hotel room, doing what everyone does when they're bored, filming themselves, trying on clothes, making TikTok-style clips. But halfway through, he appeared. A man, shirtless, walked up behind her, his reflection growing clearer as he approached. He didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arms around her waist, kissed her neck, and whispered something into her ear. She laughed. Not nervously. Not like someone who made a mistake. She turned toward him, smiled, and kissed him. My stomach twisted. There was no ambiguity. No possibility of misinterpretation. No, just a friend defense. This wasn't a slip. This wasn't drunken regret. This was comfort. Familiarity. An asterisk Macy. It was celebration. I paused the video and just stared at the screen, my reflection ghosted over the image of the two of them. My hand was trembling on the trackpad. I felt numb. Cold. Not angry. Not yet. Just hollow. I wanted to close the laptop and pretend I hadn't seen it. I wanted to wake Haley up and confront her, demand answers, watch her scramble to deny what was already so clear. But I didn't do any of that. Instead, I downloaded the video. I copied the folder to a flash drive I hadn't touched in years. Then I opened the rest. Each folder told a different story, but all of them were chapters in the same book. Haley and the same man. His face was never fully visible, but his build, his presence were consistent. Hotel rooms, rooftop lounges, beach resorts. I recognized none of them. She had never mentioned any of these trips. Never said she was taking time in Cabo or conferencing in Napa. It wasn't work. It wasn't business. It was another life. I sat there until the sun started to rise, the glow slipping through the blinds like it was ashamed to touch the room. When Haley woke up later that morning, she found me in the kitchen, pouring coffee like nothing had changed. She kissed my cheek and told me she might be late again that evening. Something about a client dinner. I nodded. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. Because now I wasn't just suspicious. I was certain. And I was done pretending. Once you've seen the truth, really seen it, it's impossible to unsee. The video haunted me. I could still hear Haley's laugh echoing in that hotel room. Could still see the way her eyes softened when she turned to him. A look I hadn't seen directed at me in months. But what followed? That's what truly broke me. Not the affair itself. Not the lies. It was what I discovered next that took me from betrayed husband to a man in survival mode. Haley left again that weekend. This time for a girls' trip in Sonoma. She said it was short, just 2 nights, something she really needed after the stress of her workload. She didn't ask my opinion. She didn't even tell me until the night before. It wasn't a conversation, it was an announcement. The moment she pulled out of the driveway, I was on her tablet. I had seen her log into it 100 times before, and thankfully, she hadn't changed the passcode. She probably thought she had nothing to hide on it, or maybe she just didn't care anymore. It didn't take long. There was a folder labeled Legal Notes. That alone made my stomach twist. I opened it and found a series of documents, notes, emails, recordings. The first few were harmless. Snippets of law firm correspondence, basic stuff. But then I saw one titled, Narrative_timeline.docs. Narrative? I opened it. It was a bulleted breakdown of events, dates, and descriptions. Except, they were about me. Me through her eyes. Or rather, the version of me she had created for someone else to believe. According to her timeline, I was emotionally unpredictable, possessive, overly attached to routine. She wrote that I interfered with her independence, that I was prone to obsessive questioning, and that I created an unsafe emotional environment for both her and our son. I read those lines over and over. Unsafe? Me? I kept digging. In her documents folder was a cache of audio recordings, at least 24, some clearly labeled, others not. I played one. It was a clip from a random night months ago, an argument we'd had about her forgetting our anniversary. But the audio was edited, spliced. She cut out her part entirely. No context, no provocation. Just my voice, frustrated, saying things that, out of context, sounded harsh. Not abusive, not even aggressive, but isolated and packaged in a way that stripped them of nuance. The manipulation was precise, calculated. Another file was an email draft, addressed to an attorney, someone named Margaret, who specialized in family transitions, according to the email signature. Haley outlined her concerns about my emotional volatility, attached some of the recordings, and asked if a custody modification would be realistic given the pattern of instability. Custody. She was preparing to cut me out of my son's life. This wasn't just infidelity. It wasn't about passion or neglect or marriage fatigue. It was strategy. It was a hostile takeover. She wasn't just escaping the marriage. She was building a case, laying groundwork, creating a version of events where she was the victim, where I was the unstable one, where she had no choice but to leave for safety, for peace, for our son. And the worst part? If I hadn't found that video, I might have believed her too, because that's how good she was, how subtle, how meticulous. She hadn't just removed herself emotionally. She was rewriting our story as she went. For every late night, She had a file to back it up. For every lie, there was a supporting document. She was controlling the narrative so thoroughly, I didn't even recognize the man she was describing. But he had my name, my habits, my flaws. Flaws she had catalogued we*p*nized. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, the tablet resting on my knees, and felt the cold wash of realization. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about Derek, the man from the videos. He was a prop, a partner in the escape plan. This was about power, control, about burning the bridge behind her so thoroughly that I couldn't follow even if I tried. I spent the rest of that day collecting what I could, downloading the files, printing copies, photographing screens. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. When our son came home from his sleepover that evening, I smiled like nothing was wrong. I helped him with his homework, made him grilled cheese, watched an old Pixar movie for the 50th time. And when he fell asleep on the couch, head in my lap, I just sat there, brushing his hair back, wondering how much he'd remember about this chapter of our lives. Would he remember his mother's laughter? Or the silence that grew between us like a wall? Would he blame me when she told her version? Or would he be old enough someday to see the whole picture? When Haley came back Sunday night, she brought wine and souvenirs and stories about overpriced spa treatments. She kissed our son's forehead and said she missed him. Then she kissed my cheek too. "Did you miss me?" she asked with a grin. I smiled. Of course. I don't know how I kept it together. Maybe because I knew confronting her would get me nowhere. She was too far ahead. Too prepared. Any fight would just feed the story she was already telling in secret. But I wasn't defenseless. Not anymore. Now I had my own narrative. And this time it was the truth. The thing about being ambushed is, if you survive it, you don't forget how it felt. You remember every step that led you there. Every second you hesitated. Every warning sign you dismissed. But once you've been ambushed, you also learn something dangerous. How to strike first. I spent the next week in quiet preparation. Haley was relaxed, maybe even smug. I think she believed her plan was working, maybe even finished. That she had crafted her version of me so convincingly I'd be too stunned to react when the time came. But what she didn't count on was what I'd learned in that silence, what I'd become in it. The moment she left for another late client dinner on Thursday, I called a private investigator. His name was Wyatt. Middle-aged, ex-military with a calm, matter-of-fact tone that didn't rise no matter how personal the details got. When I told him I needed confirmation, not suspicion, he just asked, "Do you want photos, video, or both?" "Both," I said. "And I need it soon." He nodded. "Then I'll start tonight." Over the next several days, I fed him every clue, every hotel receipt, every suspicious date, every name I'd seen in Haley's files. Especially Derek. That name was starting to show up in places it didn't belong: conference calls she didn't tell me about, calendar entries marked strategy session with no attached details, gift receipts from boutique stores in neighborhoods she claimed to hate. I stayed quiet. I acted normal. But inside, I was building a case. Wyatt worked fast. 3 days later, I had drone footage, Haley and Derek checking into the same hotel she claimed was used for company summits. Holding hands. Sharing a bottle of wine on a balcony. *T of her kissing him while they laughed at something I'd never hear. But that wasn't the only thing. Wyatt dug deeper. Derek wasn't just some random lover. He was a business partner. A quiet co-founder listed on a new LLC registered in the next county over. The business name was a sanitized version of an idea I had pitched to Haley over a year ago, an online learning platform built off my design templates, my architecture, my early-stage sketches. I had shared it with her because I trusted her. She had helped me build the pitch deck. She said it was too ambitious for now, told me to shelve it until we were more stable. I believed her. Then she took it, rebranded it, launched it with Derek. That was the final betrayal. Not just the emotional one, the strategic one, the theft of something I had made, the thing I thought might change our future. So I acted. With Wyatt's help, I compiled everything: video, photos, business documents, registry filings. I took it to a lawyer I found through a friend who had survived a vicious custody battle. Her name was Dana. Sharp, detail-obsessed, and impossible to rattle. I laid it all out for her in a conference room that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and printer toner. Dana didn't flinch. She just listened, took notes, asked questions. When I told her about Haley's fabricated narrative, about the manipulated recordings and emotional character assassination, she narrowed her eyes and said, "She's not trying to leave. She's trying to erase you." That's when we drafted the emergency motion. It included a petition to freeze all joint accounts, block unilateral withdrawals, and most importantly, secure temporary custody of our son until the court could review evidence of manipulation and potential parental alienation. It wasn't just a divorce strategy. It was a shield. By the time Haley returned from her latest overnight leadership retreat, I had already filed. She didn't notice at first. That night, she kissed me hello, complained about the hotel food, and asked if I remembered to pick up oat milk. Business as usual. But I knew what was coming and I was ready. 2 days later, she came downstairs with her phone in hand, her brow furrowed. "There's a hold on the accounts," she said. I looked up from the newspaper I wasn't really reading. "Yeah. I filed an emergency motion." She blinked. "You what?" "I filed a motion," I repeated. "Freezing assets. Requesting temporary custody." I also had the business filings reviewed. Pretty clear you and Derek used proprietary material from my original drafts. So there'll be a separate claim for intellectual property theft. Haley went pale. For the first time in months, maybe years, she looked unprepared. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." She stared at me for a moment as if trying to read a bluff that wasn't there. "You've been planning this?" she asked. "No. I've been reacting to yours." She sat down slowly as if her legs stopped trusting her. "I didn't think you'd," she started, then stopped. "No," I said. "You didn't." She tried to pivot. "This is going to destroy everything. You're escalating this." I raised an eyebrow. "You recorded our conversations. You created fake emotional abuse narratives. You filed business documents behind my back using stolen concepts. Escalation already happened. I'm just catching up." She was quiet then. She didn't apologize. She didn't deny it. She just sat there, staring at the floor like it had betrayed her too. By the end of that week, she was served. Not just divorce papers, but a formal legal complaint regarding misuse of joint assets and misrepresentation of intellectual property. The judge granted temporary sole custody to me, pending full review. A neutral forensic accountant was assigned. All travel with our son was prohibited without mutual consent. The business was frozen pending arbitration. Haley's world didn't crumble overnight, but it cracked. She tried to play it cool. For a while, she even told mutual friends that we were navigating things peacefully. But that didn't last. Because as the evidence piled up and her story started to fall apart under scrutiny, there was only one thing left to face. The truth. And the thing about truth? It doesn't need a strategy. It just needs time. Haley came to court dressed like she was attending a business luncheon, charcoal blazer, silk blouse, minimal jewelry. She wore confidence like armor, her lips set in a polite, practiced smile. Her attorney, a clean-cut man named Russell, carried a sleek binder and a briefcase full of curated outrage. They didn't know what was coming. Russell began by painting a portrait of Haley as a stressed but resilient mother navigating an emotionally unpredictable home. He referenced the audio clips, edited fragments of old arguments. He called for a psychiatric evaluation for me, citing my alleged pattern of obsessive behaviors. But then Dana stood. My lawyer didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She presented each piece of evidence in calm, methodical order, the original, unedited audio files proving the clips had been manipulated. Metadata from documents, timestamps, creation dates contradicting Haley's timeline. Then came the drone footage, the emails, the company registrations. The court watched the video from the hotel, Haley laughing in another man's arms. Silence fell in the courtroom. When Dana finished, she looked at the judge and said, "This isn't a case of emotional instability. It's a case of systematic deception." Haley's expression faltered. Her fingers twitched against the edge of her seat. Russell asked for recess. It was denied. The judge ruled immediately on temporary custody granted to me. Haley was ordered to undergo a psychological evaluation before any further custody discussions. Her access was suspended. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. But when she stood, she looked 10 years older. She didn't look at me. Just down. It was over. At least, the courtroom part. 1 month later, my son and I moved to Boulder, Colorado. Just the two of us. I rented a small house with mountain views and enough space for his Lego collection and my drafting desk. I got a job teaching design at a local art academy. Quiet, steady work. There were no arguments. No secrets. Just routines, packing lunches, drawing together in the evenings, falling asleep to the sound of wind moving through pine trees. Haley never showed up for the court-ordered evaluation. Her lawyer withdrew representation a week later. Then came the letters. First handwritten. Then emails. Then messages through mutual contacts. At first, they begged. Then they threatened. Then they pleaded again. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The life she tried to dismantle was gone. The man she thought she could manipulate no longer existed. And what she left behind, our son's laughter, the clarity of clean air, mornings without lies, was something far more powerful than revenge. It was peace. And I wasn't giving it up for anything.